I'd like to welcome everybody to the Greater Atlanta Virtual College Fair. Thank you for joining us this evening. Before I turn it over to our great panelists, just a few housekeeping items to go over. As this is a webinar, you'll be interacting with the panelists via the Q&A button, so feel free to type away any questions you might have for any of the panelists at any point during their presentation. Also want to remind you that your camera and microphone are turned off, so the panelists will not be able to see or hear you during the presentations. And please do feel free to sign up for more sessions at the same site where you signed up for tonight's session. There's quite a few college presentations going on over the next several weeks. And also just a reminder that a recording will be available of this webinar about a week from today's session at the same site where you registered. But without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to our panelists.
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are excited to talk a little bit more about the college search process and choosing a school type. So my name is Emily Davis Hamry. I am the Associate Director of Admission at Agnes Scott College. We are a small, private, liberal arts and science college for women here in Decatur, Georgia. And I've got some great colleagues who are joining me in this conversation tonight. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves and introduce their institutions as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Nayada.
Perfect, thank you. So good evening, everyone. My name is Nayada Schuler, and I serve as an Assistant Director of Admissions at Spelman College. Spelman College is a small, private, liberal arts, all-women's HBCU. So we will talk about some of those different school types as we go through the presentation. Now I will pass it over to Michael.
Awesome, and way to follow up after Spelman. Michael Gum, Assistant Director of Admissions for Morehouse College. Truly love Morehouse. I graduated from there. Top feeder school for graduate schools, also known as America's hottest college for men. So definitely take a look at us. We are an all-male institution. And one quick fact is that we will graduate 500 plus African-American men each year. So we're super excited about that. I am going to pass it over to Zach.
Excellent, thank you. My name is Zachary Adam, the Director of Regional Recruitment for the Savannah College of Art and Design. We are an art and design university, private, nonprofit, accredited, all those great things. And we have campuses in Savannah, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, online via e-learning, and in Lacoste, France. So really excited to be here today, and I'm gonna hand it over to our last panelist, Alex.
Thank you, Zach. My name is Alex Thomas. I serve as the Assistant Director of Admissions at Georgia State University, which is now the largest university in the state of Georgia in terms of enrollment. Georgia State is one of the most diverse campuses in the entire country as well, and we've come a really long ways in a short amount of time. So yeah, I'm just really excited about the future of Georgia State and to tell you a little bit more about choosing your school type.
Awesome, thank you everybody. I know I got to learn a little bit about some of the other institutions, so hopefully you did too. I do also want to briefly mention we have another team member who's going to be behind the scenes. That's going to be Faith. And as you're going through the conversation, if you have any questions, put those in the Q&A box, and Faith is really going to be in there either answering those questions for you in that space or saving them for the end of the presentation when our panelists are going to try and answer as many of those questions as we can. So with that, we will go ahead and get started and talk a little bit more about why we're even having this conversation. Why are we hosting a session on the different types of institutions that are out there? If you're anything like me starting the college search, it's a little bit intimidating. There are thousands of different institutions in the United States, and it's hard to figure out exactly which one is going to be a good fit for you, and it's going to offer you the things that you need out of that college experience. And so understanding the different types of institutions that are out there, understanding the characteristics maybe that go along with those types of schools, whether that's size, resources, academic focus, anything like that, the more you understand that, the easier it's going to be to narrow down that funnel of institutions and figure out which one could be a good fit for you. So one example you'll see up on the screen is Spelman College. So Spelman, like most institutions, is a combination of different school types. So they are a private, four-year, liberal arts, single-gendered HBCU. So you take those thousands of colleges in the United States, but as you start figuring out the types of institutions that you're interested in, you want to go to a private school, it's really important for you to have a 4-year experience. You're excited about the liberal arts and attending a women's college, but it's also really important for you to be in that HBCU environment. Then that list is going to get narrower and narrower until you find Spelman and you think, hey, this is a really great institution that maybe I want to sign up for a virtual visit or connect with NIADA and learn a little bit more about them and what my experience at Spelman could look like. So that's why kind of knowing the types of schools that are out there is important, because it's going to help you really navigate that college search process and figure out what's going to be a good fit for you. So now that we understand why knowing school types matter, the next step is figuring out, okay, well, what is it that's important to you in that process? So on the screen, we've got some different questions for you to consider and to ask yourself as you're starting that college search. So I recommend if you're watching on a phone or a computer, go ahead and take a screenshot, take a photo of the screen, and save these questions for later so that when you do have a few minutes by yourself, when you're starting to explore different college options, ask yourself these questions, set aside the time to reflect on your answers and really see how that's going to help guide your college search process. For now, we're just going to go briefly over them and talk a little bit about some of these questions. To kick it off, what size classroom do I learn best in? That's a pretty good, basic, easy question to start with, you know? What's the largest class you've ever had? What's the smallest class you ever had? And which one felt right to you? Because that's going to help you figure out, okay, well, what kind of institution is going to be a good fit? What resources do I need to be successful? Maybe you have a 504 plan now in high school, or you know of certain resources that you really need to make your academics more accessible. There's actually a really great panel coming up on Thursday with the Greater Area Atlanta colleges. It's talking about student support services, what that looks like in college, and what some of our different institutions offer. So like we mentioned in the beginning, you can go back to that page where you signed up for this session and learn more about that student support services panel as well. What did you like about your high school experience? What do you wish was different? Again, this can go back to class size. Maybe you had pretty big classes and you know that you really want smaller environments to learn in. So maybe you'll look for a small college, or the opposite. You want to have a much larger experience than you had in high school. And so that's going to help you navigate kind of the institutions that you consider at college. What are your academic interests? Maybe you know exactly what you want to study, or you have absolutely no idea what you want to study and you want a little bit of time to explore that before you have to commit to a certain major or minor. Again, this is going to help you figure out good institutions that will be a fit for you as we go through and talk about the different types of schools. When you think about your ideal college experience, so you're imagining yourself, you're already in college, maybe you're living in a residence hall, maybe sitting in academic classes or the library, what does that experience look like for you? What are the things that are really going to be important? Whether it is the courses that you're taking, having access to a city, having access to internships and research opportunities, being able to go and attend football games on the weekend, having a strong sense of school spirit, or just a really strong community in general. These are all different aspects that once you have a better idea of what's important to you, you can start searching for those things in the institutions you're considering. And then lastly, what do you want to do after your undergraduate career? Are you planning on continuing your education, maybe going to graduate school, med school, law school, or going straight into a job or even a military career after graduation? If you don't know, that's okay too. All of those different options are going to help you figure out what kinds of institutions you should be considering. So now that we have a little bit of information on why we're having this conversation, as well as questions to kind of get you started in that college search process, we're going to start talking about those different types of schools, starting with kind of the basics of looking at 4-year and 2-year institutions.
Yeah, so if we go back one slide, I think we jumped one. Thanks. So starting off with 4-year universities, 4-year institutions, these are some of the ones that I know students are most familiar with. These are typically institutions that do award bachelor's degrees. And typically they have what we consider that traditional collegiate experience. So that includes the on-campus housing, campus events is typically the things that students take away from having that overall college experience. And generally, they do have more academic options. So, for example, a lot of universities will have different schools within a specific college or university. And then typically you also have more outside opportunities as well, including study abroad, internships, research co-ops, and so forth. There are some schools such as my own at Georgia State that actually offer a four-year university campus and also two-year colleges as well.
Great, and if I can add to Alex's component, two-year institutions are awesome because if you are trying to advance, a lot of individuals find it that going to a two-year can actually allow you to save on money. So if you want to go ahead and earn your associate's degree, you have that opportunity. A lot of two-year institutions also, what you want to look at is the transfer opportunities for that. So you need to know what credits are transferable, which credits are not. And so with the 2 year, generally flexible scheduling, people frequently work while attending college. And so you want to keep that in mind, that it just depends on, specifically what you plan to do. And so 2 year institutions are amazing, 4 year institutions are amazing. There's different routes, right? But the whole idea is that you're going to get your degree, whether you're going for your associate's degree or whether you're going for your bachelor's degree, and how you decide to split that up is totally up to you. But there is plenty of opportunity to do so. We could go to the next slide.
Perfect, thank you. So as we're talking about school type, we are also going to talk about public colleges and universities versus private colleges and universities. So in terms of the main difference between public and private colleges and universities is ultimately how they're funded. Public colleges are funded by local and state funds, so they generally are funded by state governments. In addition, my colleague Zach will talk about private colleges, but in addition, private colleges are funded through tuition and outside resources, so he will discuss that. Other differences include the size of the student body, degree programs offered, and cost of attendance or cost of tuition. So you may find that at many public colleges and universities, the student body or the college or university itself is a little larger than the size of a private college or university. In addition, you may find that when you look at the student body and look at the different geographic regions or states or countries that their students matriculate from, you may find that there's a larger population of in-state students versus their out-of-state or international students as well. And then one other way to visualize public colleges and universities is to think of the university systems that you may be familiar with. So university systems like in Georgia, where there are multiple universities linked together. So some of the different examples of public colleges and universities are listed here, and that would include Georgia Tech, the University of Georgia, so UGA, and Georgia State University. And next we will cover private colleges and universities.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, so private colleges are going to vary a little bit from those public universities in a few kind of fundamental ways. So as indicated just previously, they are oftentimes funded by tuition and private donors. And so although sometimes there are state funds involved, the majority of the funding is going to come from that tuition and private donors supporting that, oftentimes in the forms of alumni or companies that are supporting universities. There's a couple of different means to funding there. Now, one nice benefit to private universities is there's typically no difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition. This goes for international students as well. Sometimes there is not a difference in terms of scholarships and financial aid opportunities for international students versus domestic students. It really does depend on the university though, and the institution. So you definitely want to do that research as you go through the process. This is just kind of to give you a little bit more of a general overview in general. Now, size as well does vary. For instance, SCAD, we have across our campuses about 15,000 students, so definitely not tiny by any means, but in general, we're not looking at the tens of thousands of students you might see at a typical larger state institution. So a little bit smaller, that often means smaller class sizes for students, maybe slightly more individualized resources, but it once again will depend from institution to institution. They oftentimes do also allow you the ability to specialize in certain academic fields. So beyond just the traditional Bachelor of Arts, there's also Bachelor of Science, Bachelors of Fine Arts, and a lot of different possible major specific programs. So there's a lot of way to specialize even within the academic fields you might be interested in studying that go beyond some of those more general programs. Now, another great thing, because of that difference where there's no difference in in-state versus out-of-state tuition, these schools, these private universities do tend to draw from a wider geographic area, both domestically and sometimes internationally as well. I know, like I said, at SCAD, we have about all 50 states represented at this point, over 100 different countries. And so because there's not maybe a cost restriction there, we're going to be pulling in from maybe more states throughout the country. And then the specific scholarship and financial aid packages to the school, this is really important. So this is going to really vary from university to university again. Instead of looking at an entire university system where there might be very consistent scholarship and funding guidelines from across the entire system, those private universities are oftentimes going to have very specific scholarship opportunities that might have very specific requirements. So it's really important as you go through the process to review what types of scholarships and funding opportunities you may qualify for, because that can really vary. But one thing I always like to just kind of dispel is that it is not always true that private universities and colleges are going to be more expensive than a public university. Depending on the types of scholarships you're qualifying for, maybe different specific funding opportunities, maybe be based off of your grades or your test scores or something like that. It's oftentimes comparable depending on where you're coming from in terms of costs. So it's great to take a look at a wide variety of different options beyond just public or private. It's great to look on both sides of that. Now, a couple examples here that are represented in this event: Agnes Scott College, Oglethorpe University, Emory University, SCAD, Spelman College, and Morehouse College are all great examples of private colleges and universities. So next, we're going to move on to kind of our more specific focus. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through all of the different specific types of universities you might encounter. Now, this is not technically an exhaustive list, and we did try to come up with a fairly exhaustive list for you. So this might not cover every single school type that you might be thinking of, but hopefully this should cover quite a few of the ones that you might be considering. So to talk about research universities, I'm going to have it over back to Alex.
Thanks, Zach. So just to kind of cover research universities just a bit. So typically these are research universities that are dedicated to research as a central part of their mission. So for example, you might have instructors and professors across the campus who are actually conducting their own research projects. Typically, these universities have a dedicated staff who manage grants and different other research programs that might be connected to government entities. And so typically these are institutions that have very large resources that are poured into research. And there's 250 plus universities across the US that are typically classified as research universities. Just to add to that, there's also different tiers as well. So if you ever hear the term tier 1 or tier 2 research university, just know that these are typically ways that people in the academic community typically separate different universities when it comes to research. Oftentimes, these schools are split into different colleges or schools, such as a College of Law or School of Nursing and so forth. And they can be public or private. And so many times research universities will be supported by their state government, such as Georgia State, Georgia Tech, UGA, right here in the state of Georgia. But there's also many private universities that have large endowments as well. And you also have generally high-level master's and doctoral degree programs that are available at research universities as well. And they do tend to be larger in size, but that's not always the case. Just from my own experience, I know of many smaller private research universities that exist, not only in Georgia, but throughout the US. So it is important for you to do your own research into the research universities that you might be interested in. And I'll move on.
Perfect, thank you. So next we will take a look at liberal arts colleges. And just in general, liberal arts colleges offer a broad base of courses in the liberal arts, which includes areas such as literature, history, languages, mathematics, and the sciences, just to name a few. Most liberal arts colleges are private and offer four-year programs that lead to a bachelor's degree. And these colleges can prepare students or prepare you for a variety of different careers or for graduate study as well. So just some of the information you see in front of you, all of it is very important, but just some that we would like to highlight as well is that there are 450 plus liberal arts colleges within the United States. And along with focusing on an excellent academic experience, there's also an emphasis on skill development and also personal development, even outside of the classroom as well. Some of the common characteristics of a liberal arts college include smaller class sizes, an emphasis on innovation and critical thinking, service learning and civic engagement. There is a focus on the residential experience and the community experience, a holistic approach to education. So students at liberal arts colleges are often encouraged to, in a way, customize their educational experience. So to have an interdisciplinary educational experience, combine majors, add a major and a minor together during your 4 years or so at the college or university. If you are interested in biology, for example, and also interested in the social sciences, consider combining them as well. In addition, experiential learning is often emphasized at liberal arts colleges. I mentioned that we do have a broad-based curriculum, or we tend to have a broad-based curriculum at a liberal arts college to promote a wide range of career possibilities. And then liberal arts colleges, their mission is often based on undergraduate study. And so many of them do commonly award bachelor's degrees. However, there are some liberal arts colleges that also offer graduate programs as well.
And so with community colleges, typically these are two-year institutions that do offer associate degrees. These can be different across the US. So for example, they might offer remedial education, GEDs, and technical degrees, but sometimes they also offer degrees that can easily be transferred to a four-year university as well. And typically the tuition is discounted based on your state. And so the tuition is one of the big attractions for many students who are interested in enrolling at community colleges because of the affordability. And then also you'll typically have students from various walks of life as well. So these are ones where you typically have students who might be working full-time, going back to school. You'll have a lot of non-traditional students as well at different community colleges. And a lot of the students are primarily focused on those core classes, or what we consider your general education requirements. And then also you might be familiar with community colleges just through your own experience. So there's a lot of students throughout the state of Georgia right now who take dual enrollment classes, and that might be at your local two-year community college or technical college.
Okay, so the next component, obviously paying for college is important. And so military service academies and colleges. So just by the show of hands, or if you guys could, with all the individuals on the panel, if you offer ROTC as an opportunity, can you just give us a thumbs up? I'm gonna give mine right here. Just give a thumbs up, because I know ROTC is an amazing component. There it is. Yep, Emily, Zach, I know you guys do. It's really awesome. So if you have that opportunity, you definitely want to look at ROTC. Not only can you pay for college and you're looking at those avenues, but it's very important to know what the actual opportunities actually are. And so first you have the Reserve Officer Training Corps, obviously ROTC, the name of it. So those programs are available for more than 1,000 US colleges and universities that offer by every branch of the military, right? So we have Army, Navy, Coast Guard, and so forth. And so, you know, the federal service academies that you're familiar with, senior military colleges that offer it, such as like Citadel and Texas A&M, they also enroll civilians. So when you think about ROTC, you need to think about it on the front end of being able to help you in college, but then on the back end, right? And so you want to look at those opportunities. So each type works differently. For Federal Service Academy, you may be nominated by a congressional representative, senator, VP, or the president, right? And so admissions is highly competitive. You'll be so surprised how much money you can actually earn taking ROTC or taking the military route to actually pay for college. A lot of those individuals find themselves not having to worry about college debt, and find themselves really advancing. So you definitely don't want to sleep on an opportunity. Once getting in, you do not pay tuition or room and board. Senior military colleges, state supported, have options to join ROTC prep programs again. And doing so will cover part of cost, will require a term of duty after graduation. So know what you're getting into. I think that's the biggest part. And so the takeaway is know exactly what you're doing. Look at these options and see if it's the right fit for you. We've had several students that have gone ROTC route. Several of them are my friends that graduated Morehouse with me, and they have done extremely, extremely well. And they don't have $48,000 to worry about each year. So that's something you want to think about. Next slide.
Yeah, so another kind of type of institution that's out there are single gendered institutions. So we have both women's colleges and men's colleges that are included in this kind of idea. And so we have about 3 different men's colleges, including Morehouse, that are in the United States, and 34 women's colleges, including both Agnes Scott and Spelman. So I think, you know, what I love about single gendered institutions is that even though there are so few of us, less than 40 in the US, we all have such different identities, such different communities and campus cultures. One way that you can see that is through kind of the variety of admission policies when it does come to gender. So that's another aspect of that women's college experience that maybe you could explore. So for example, some institutions have policies in which they only admit cisgendered students who kind of match the gender identity of their institution and really focus on serving those students and their voices and creating space for their voice. Other institutions like Agnes Scott, of course, you know, respect the voices of women, and that's the center of their education, but they also include other historically marginalized gender identities. So that's including students who identify as trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, agender, really anyone who's living outside of that gender binary. So that's a great thing to connect with admission counselors about and see where they fall. Maybe they fall somewhere in between those 2 different policies. So learning a little bit more about the institution that way, because that's just one factor that of course is going to affect the community on that campus and perhaps the conversations that you're having with your fellow students as well.
Perfect. And I will also add to the conversation about women's colleges before passing it over to Michael to talk about men's colleges. But just to add on to what Emily Davis mentioned, at women's colleges, there are often high levels of alumni engagement. So alumni often serve as mentors and advocates for both current students and prospective students. I know that at both Agnes Scott and Spelman specifically, our alumni are not only involved in the recruitment process and working with students to understand what the experience is like, but they also are involved in networking opportunities and connecting our students to opportunities. So just to paint a picture really quickly, Agnes Scott has a network of over 14,000 alumni, and Spelman College has an alumni network of over 19,000. So high levels of alumni engagement, both at women's colleges and men's colleges, and I'll pass it over to Michael.
Absolutely. So, you know, I think there's a misconception that when you go to a single gender school, that everybody is the same, right? But we find it so interesting that you can learn so much from being in your own single gender or what you call gender, or how we define that as an open terminology now. But the concept of really being able to be around a certain group that is very the same causes you to identify and define yourself more. And so that's all I want to add to what these amazing ladies have stated, which is that when you go to the institution, it's nice to be surrounded by just people that are just like you, right? And then you can identify in these like classroom settings where typically you might not have the same kind of distractions. You know, I know when I went to Morehouse, I love the fact that it was the first area of comfortability where I didn't have to look over my shoulder as a Black male or think to myself that there was going to be a problem, right? And so just the ability to just be comfortable in your own skin and then to come out 4 years knowing that that definition of self was there was really awesome. So single gender is making it happen. And I know there's also specific classes as well that are designed for that too.
Awesome. Yeah, that was so interesting. I always love learning about these unique institutions. So next to kind of move forward, we're going to talk about art and design colleges. So SCAD obviously being one of the biggest in Georgia. So we mainly focus on art and design, though each school may actually have a different focus. Okay, so SCAD actually covers a lot more than just what you might think of traditional art and design. A lot of times when people think of art and design schools, they think of painting and drawing, sculpture, photography. And obviously those fine arts are a huge part of what we do at SCAD, but we oftentimes do very much blur the line between STEM and STEAM, business, sometimes even the medical field. So it's really kind of impressive that, you look at all of these different opportunities that are out there. They might be more than you expect in terms of if you have a creative mind, if you're a creative thinker, you can oftentimes apply those skill sets to a wide range of fields, even at our design school. But other schools within our design do tend to have maybe a more specific fit. So FIT focuses mainly on fashion. They've added a few other programs beyond that in recent years, but still kind of mainly focusing on those fashion type programs. And so you want to kind of get an idea of if there's one that has more general focus or more specific focus. Many of them do stand alone like SCAD, and we are our own university, but other larger universities do oftentimes have schools or colleges within their larger programs that specialize in art and design fields. One great thing when comparing those to keep in mind is think about resource management, resource allocation. Obviously, if this is something you're really passionate about and you really want to dive into, it's great knowing that there are specific resources available for you and your program dedicated, and you're not going to be just kind of like a side major, maybe a less popular major. You can be kind of surrounded, almost like when we talked about men's and women's colleges. There's something positive about being surrounded by other creatives, other creative thinkers, and people who kind of identify with those types of skill sets. Now, because of that, we do tend to have fewer general education requirements. Some don't really have any. SCAD does require some general education requirements and foundation requirements, but especially with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, the majority of your classes are going to be more of those major specific studio-based classes. And it is important to keep in mind, although SCAD does not require a portfolio, many art and design school universities do require a portfolio for admission and do require you to apply into a specific program. So SCAD does not, but many do. So just something to keep in mind when comparing other art and design universities. So hand it over to Emily.
Yeah, so next up, we are going to talk a little bit about religious affiliated colleges. When I think about kind of religiously affiliated institutions, it's really a spectrum. There are so many different levels of what that looks like in a day-to-day life of a student. So some schools might have kind of a history that religious affiliation is based on. So for example, Agnes Scott, we were founded by the Presbyterian Church. We continue to be affiliated with the Presbyterian Church, but it's not a huge part of our students' everyday life at Agnes Scott. Other institutions, it might be a really, really big part of that day-to-day experience. So schools like Notre Dame or Brigham Young, they have perhaps codes of conduct based on that religious affiliation, different requirements when it comes to chapel or religious courses that you're taking during your undergrad career that are going to be a bigger part of that, like I said, day-to-day life. So it's up to you to figure out kind of what you're interested in and how much that matters to you, whether you want that religious affiliation to be a part of your everyday life, or maybe it's not a big factor for your overall college experience. Either way, in most cases, you're not required to be a member of the religion of the college a member of the religion that the college is affiliated with in order to attend that institution. But it's important to remember that if the institution does have, for example, a code of conduct based on their religion, you're still going to be expected to adhere to that code of conduct, just like other students. So if you're interested in a school that does have that religious affiliation, it's definitely worth checking in with the admission office, connecting with current students to hear a little bit more about what that experience actually looks like, what the requirements are, and again, how much of your everyday life is going to be involved with that religious affiliation.
Awesome. So next we will take a look really quickly at minority serving institutions and also have a conversation as well in more detail about HSIs and HBCUs. So my colleague Michael and I will be discussing this. So in general, minority serving institutions are institutions of higher education that serve minority populations. They are unique both in their missions and in their day-to-day operations. Historically Black colleges and universities, also known as HBCUs, often focus on educating African American students or students of color, and Hispanic serving institutions, so HSIs, are colleges where at least 25% of the full-time undergraduate students are Hispanic. Both HBCUs and HSIs, as well as minority serving institutions in general, may offer programs, services, and activities targeted to the underrepresented students they serve. So I will pass it over to Michael to go into more detail about that.
Sure. I could go on this one, but we won't. So the thing is, with minority serving institutions like the Morehouse, and you look at the list, right? And I always say it's important to know the list. Morehouse, Howard, Hampton, Tuskegee, Fort Valley, HBCUs in history and how they are focused was that they were generated with the idea of giving you an opportunity when no one else did. And what I mean by that is historically the underrepresentation, as Natalia is mentioning. And so with coming to a institution like a Morehouse or a Spelman, you are it's catered to that idea of culture and that idea of sort of being a part of the Divine Nine, right? So Greek life, Greek fraternities in that way. It's also catered to just you knowing who you are. And I think that's a big component to why you would choose an HBCU. In terms of a choice. But it's really amazing because what's not talked about is that most actually have a lot of burial sites on campus. So when you go and you visit and you get a chance to see the history, you really get that other dynamic. And so it kind of feels like more of a museum feel when you visit. And so getting a chance to visit is definitely something, hopefully after COVID is over, you can visit these and add them to your list. But as Natalia mentioned, it's definitely something you don't want to not look at. So yeah.
All right, now specific academic and other focus. So this is a little bit more broader than some of these other specific ones, but we did want to cover some of the other more, specific university types that might include some of those multiple types as we started from the beginning. Oftentimes universities do actually fit into many of these categories, but a couple of them are technology focused. So things like Georgia Tech that are going to have a real strong focus on technology, similar to like MIT or IT in other states. Art colleges like SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. Conservatory colleges, so these are going to focus mainly on things like music, dance, performing arts, and things like that. Juilliard, obviously a great example of that. Engineering, so Emory-Riddle is a great example of an engineering, aeronautical focus, very, very specific focus. There's not going to be a ton of other extra classes, programs. They're all going to be in a very specific area. And then work-based like Berea College. So, and many more. So we like to leave that open, like we keep saying, keep doing your research, because there are a lot of specific focus universities out there. And one of the big benefits are, giving you those dedicated resources. So they can let you specifically focus in one area that what you really want to do is, what you're passionate about. One thing we see a lot of times with specific academic focus universities and colleges is that the students tend to be really passionate about one specific area, and that's really what they're excited to do on a day-to-day basis in out of the classroom. So they do technically oftentimes require less general education, but also do have less room to switch in majors. So you'll definitely want to take a look. Like I said, SCAD, for instance, has a lot of opportunities across different programs. Georgia Tech, quite a few programs across different majors. But some of them like Embry-Riddle, like Juilliard, might be very, very specific. So it's always important to keep that in mind before you apply, especially if you're not sure exactly what you want to do. But if you have a passion in a certain area, but you have some flexibility within that area, then these are a great opportunity. So one thing to keep in mind too, very focused on research or project-based work. So you really want to, if you want that more hands-on experience, liberal arts universities tend to be a lot more writing-based. I went to a liberal arts university, and they tend to be more focused on kind of those general thoughts and ideas and questions, whereas these specific academic focused universities tend to really, really hone in on that hands-on project-based or research-based work. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. So, but kind of moving into the last section here, because we do want to give everyone a chance to ask some questions and get some of those questions answered. So if you haven't put a question in the Q&A yet, please feel free to add one in and we'll start answering those here in just a second. But with all these options, how do you choose, okay? So use the questions that we shared at the beginning. And if you haven't seen them, we can always share those again to kind of think about how you want to prioritize universities. It is very true that you might have different interests across all of these different programs, but it's great to be able to make a priority list for those. Visit, even if it's virtually. I know some of our colleges and universities here in Georgia have begun doing some in-person or some limited in-person visits, but virtual is a great option. Most universities have some type of virtual visit option or great content online that you can engage with. Talk to parents, teachers, and mentors. See where they've been going, see where they've thrived, see where they think you might be a good fit. It's always great to get outside perspectives on exactly what you might do and where you might go, because sometimes it's a little bit less biased when you have an outside opinion of what you're looking at doing. And you don't have to choose just one. I think this is the best advice. This is something I talk with students all the time. Do not limit yourself. Even if you're interested in something like research, or you really want to go to a women's college, or you might be interested in technology, don't hesitate to apply. Many times there are very few barriers to applying to multiple universities and colleges, and it gives you time. It gives you time to figure out exactly what you want to do. You can gives you access sometimes to a personal admissions advisor or somebody who can guide you through the process. So use that application process, use applying as a way to get to know your university or the universities you might be considering a little bit better, and don't hold back. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of good reasons to explore a wide range of colleges and universities before deciding on one. But with that, we can kind of move forward into the Q&A.
Yes, awesome. So hopefully you were able to learn a lot about the different types of institutions that are out there. We only have time for maybe one or two questions, so we've got a couple that we will go ahead and answer. If we aren't able to get to your question, then we should have access to that after the event, so we will do our best to follow up with you and get that question answered. So it looks like the first question that we have is there a type of institution that is going to best suit me if I am interested in studying two different majors?
So I'll start. This is Nayada Schuler with Spelman College. I will say that a liberal arts college could definitely be an option. Of course, I say that as I am at a liberal arts college. As a reminder, liberal arts colleges often encourage you to pursue interdisciplinary studies. So that means combining studies from different academic divisions or different academic departments and combining them to fit your academic interests. So while a liberal arts college or university is not the only option, it is an option for those who may be interested in combining academic interests.
And I would add too, I mean, make sure once again you do your research. I mean, because even like I said, with a specific school like SCAD, I mean, we offer a wide range of programs and really do have an interdisciplinary focus even within art and design. So keep in mind, you can even within a specific area find some interdisciplinary opportunities as well.
Awesome. And it looks like there are a few more questions, but we are just at time. And I know StriveScan has a little bit of wrapping up of their own to do. So like I said, if you did put a question in the Q&A box, we will do our best to follow up with you and get you that information that you need after the event.
Great. Thank you to all of your panelists. Really interesting presentation this evening. And again, as they mentioned, they will be able to follow up on any unanswered questions within about a week. They'll have access to that information. So as we wrap it up, I want to just share a few last things with all of you. First of all, thank you to everybody who joined us this evening. And again, thank you to all of our panelists for their excellent presentations. When you sign off of this presentation, you will receive a very quick 4-question survey. So please just take a minute and answer that questions. Also, just a reminder to sign up for more sessions if you're interested. There are various college information sessions happening. And as mentioned, a recording of this webinar will be available in about a week's time at the same website where you registered for tonight's session. So thank you to all of you. Good luck in your college search process, and have a good evening.